Hello, everyone, and welcome to our sneak peek for the new curriculum that is happening in September coming up. So just a reminder that as we start with all of our sessions, we are reminded of our mission and vision to be living and learning in our Catholic faith so that students centered in Christ realize their full potential. And the work that we're doing with new curriculum is very well aligned with our school board priorities, where we're looking at integrating the board priorities in the work that we do. And this is really evident as we're progressing through this year and moving into next year, where we're looking at culturally responsive teaching, again, getting into universal strategies that are going to really acknowledge the student story and the importance of student in this work. Indigenous ways of knowing and integrating that. There are many different ways of knowing to integrate within, and that looking at the whole child. And then, of course, looking at wellness and the wellness framework. And we know that all students need to feel safe and be in good relationship with others before they can succeed academically. So today, in the next little while, we'll be sharing with you just some tips and tricks of things that are happening coming up in September. We've been getting some questions with new curriculum implementation and what that looks like for next year. So as it currently stands, we would like to share with you what's mandated, what curriculum changes you can expect in K-3 and 4-6, what implementation supports we are already thinking about for you, as well as some ideas to get you thinking about September for those of you that are moving forward in this area. So here's just a reminder about what has been mandated for September 2023. We have English language, arts and literature for grades 4-6. French immersion is our language, arts and literature, which we have been piloting this year, K-6, but next year will be mandated for K-3. And then we will also be looking at optional implementation for 4-6 because of the great work that's been happening in our French immersion schools with the pilot. We have mathematics, grade 4-6, and science, K-3. So to be reminded of the power of 5, as we're looking at new curriculum, it's really coming back to the core around this work. We are looking at the mandates. We are required as Alberta educators to be teaching the curriculum as is outlined in the new curriculum areas. So again, that's K-3 science, PLAL, as well as K-6 ELAL and math. We are professionals. We know that as professionals, we have the unique opportunity to be designers of learning. And again, designing learning in a way that meets the needs of, we know, our very diverse and beautiful mosaic of classrooms that we have. A lot also is the same. So starting with what you know. Nobody is expecting for us to have all of the curriculum memorized or figured out. So it's really starting with what we know, which is good pedagogy and good practice, getting to know your kids, starting out with relationship, and then moving forward as we sort of navigate and develop more understanding around new curriculum. Assessment, we are outcomes based and we have been for a while now. And just a reminder that it really is the learning outcomes that are being assessed on, reported on. So not to get lost in the cusps, they're to be used as inspiration for how you're going to design your lessons and your unit plans. But really it's coming back to often those learning outcomes and the extent to which students are achieving those outcomes that you are mandated to be teaching. And finally, PG opportunities. As this year in our new curriculum implementation, our NCIS team is very excited to walk alongside you as we move forward, step by step, inch by inch, minute by minute, so that we can support one another and be responsive to your needs in the school. So this is our implementation roadmap that we use this year, and we've updated it just a little bit, but we'll continue to kind of travel up and down this road together as we look at our network within our new curriculum team, as well as the system-wide communication, so those connections between central office, district, as well as all of the communications that happen, like LS Weekly, engaging our administration meetings as well. And so we'll continue to make sure consistency around system-wide communication happens, because there's a lot going on and we want to just be make sure we have many entry points for that work. We will continue to have our teachers and school engagement through our communities of practice, our school engagement teams, and we're really hoping to build out more of the grade level professional learning communities that we got started this year, particularly in our kindergarten and in our combined grades. So we're really hoping to extend that out a bit more divisionally next year. We have professional growth opportunities that will continue to be responsive and developed based on your needs, as well as where your plan is taking us in the work that we're doing around curriculum implementation. And we want to focus not just on the pedagogy piece, but really be responsive to your practical, timely needs of what is needed right now. And sort of, again, like I was saying, step by step, and we're going to take it sort of a month or two at a time as we're progressing next year. So slowing down and going a bit deeper into getting that understanding around curriculum, and then also the practical ways in which we can engage students in that learning. Everything will continue to be built out in our new curriculum implementation Google site, which of course is connected through our EPD, and then also the subject-specific EPD sites, which again are where you can go for that deeper pedagogical understandings and some really great tools and templates and planning strategies to support you within that specific subject area that you're focusing on. And finally, we will be again developing our scope and sequence documents. And there's been many more across the province that are now available that we're collaborating on, and we'll be sharing some with you today. But remind you that you are a teacher, and it is your professional judgment as to how you are scoping out your curriculum. However, if you do follow the scope and sequence that we're providing, that is how our PD will be provided in that same sequence, just for the sake of logistics and really wanting to go deep with developing that teacher understanding around curriculum. So this is, as you've seen, our K-12 curriculum architecture design that Alberta Education has put forward. And you can see it's a spiral where you're going from sort of those organizing ideas through to guiding questions. So those are great sort of inquiry questions to get started with. And then it digs in deeper to the learning outcomes, the knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures, which you'll hear us call them CUSPs. And then finally, the embedding of literacy, numeracy competencies within those. So we're going to get started with ELAL, and I'll pass it over.
Thank you, Dr. Lynn. So for ELAL, you will notice there are organizing ideas that are from K to 6. So you'll see the text forms and structures, oral language, vocabulary, phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, comprehension, writing, and conventions. What's really nice about the curriculum is we have a 1-to-1 ratio of our organizing idea to our learning outcome. You will notice phonological awareness does drop off in grade 3, and fluency also drops off in grade 4, and phonics as well. So our grade 4 to 6 curriculum changes. There are many bright spots, and you will notice that a lot of the curriculum is staying the same and will be very familiar to our 4 to 6 teachers. So the word changes are increasing your clarity of expectations. It's well laid out, it's understandable. Now literature is no longer specific, which really allows you to have that choice. So they might tell you to look at a specific text form, but you can choose which literature you'd like to use. The wording has become more inclusive of all of our learners. As well, there's increased clarity and alignment of learning outcomes and our CUSPs. So you will notice that there is great alignment with the grade level expectations and grade progressions, as well as specific support lesson development. This curriculum is research based on that science of reading, and as well there are digital literacy and text options integrated. Now, when we think of points to ponder, you might notice there are some things that are not familiar to us. So the oral language is still largely focused on, so that giving speeches and presentations, which may not be inclusive of all of our learners. As well, there are some teacher background and knowledge in new areas like word morphology and pillars of reading that we will continue to provide PG on. As well, we're looking at a lack of specific literature. So they have some specific types like fantasy or tragedy or humorous, where we will look for those specific literature pieces for you. Finally, the historical thinking and land literacy, where we will continue to build out some PG and background knowledge for our teachers. Our big rocks. So I have 3 big rocks: the mentor text, the literacy block, and the comprehensive literacy. Mentor text, really taking the idea of any form of text, whether it be digital or physical, where you can use that text to really hook the students and allow all students to access whatever concept you are looking at. And again, that can be cross-curricular. Then we look at our literacy block, which really is the anchor for all of our ELAL instruction. So being able to really piece out what you are doing in the curriculum in a nice manner. So looking at cusp review, oral language and storytelling, having your whole group and small group instruction for reading, writing, and vocabulary, and as well as never forgetting that assessment. Finally, that comprehensive literacy. You would have noticed this from the K-3 as well. Implementation really correlates to the new curriculum organizing ideas like phonics and phonological awareness. You will see those directly linked. As we think about our pillars, the reading, writing, and oral language, those explicit skills now are at the forefront, but we continue to use that small group and whole group instruction to help with that. And at the end of the day, with our comprehensive literacy, we want our students to be effective communicators. So here's that picture icon of that comprehensive literacy, and then you'll see that literacy block and how they are really connected and work one together. As we think about the 4 to 6 implementation supports, there are some scope and sequences that are created for grade 4, 5, and 6 from other districts that we have linked on here. So please use those as a way to kind of plan and get your head around what this new curriculum will look like. As well, there are so many wonderful professional learning opportunities from CRC, ARPDC, and ERLC. Please click and look. I know, for example, I was on the layers of writing sessions, and they are fantastic. Finally, that resources, whether it's through the NCIS site or the EPD ELAL site. We have lots of different resources like the Words Their Way, Empowering Writers, Mentor Text Templates, Layers of Literacy, and Daily 5 to kind of get you started. Remember, start with what you are already doing and continue to build. As we think about your ideas for September, we want to remind you that what you're doing is already fantastic. So in September, don't fret. Just start with those, establishing those classroom routines. So building a connection, a family with your students, maybe connecting to the Pew Wellness through your past resources, getting started with your students. Maybe you start doing some autobiographies, looking at different text types, and really thinking about your literacy block, building those routines with your classroom, whether it's through Daily 5, guided reading, whatever you feel comfortable with, but beginning those routines with your students.
Thanks so much, Kim. Now we're going to move on to K-3 science.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so here are the organizing ideas for science K-6. As K-3 teachers, you'll see that space is not included as an organizing idea. And as a kindergarten teacher, you also will not have living systems or scientific methods included. So for the K-3 curriculum changes, some bright spots are that those organizing ideas build upon each other from grade to grade. Also, there's guiding questions under each organizing idea that allow for connections to be made throughout the grade between the different organizing ideas, or as you thought about them in the past, those topics. The vocabulary is much more accessible for our students compared to the first draft, so that's great. You'll see a lot of opportunity for environmental literacy to be included within your different organizing ideas. And so many opportunities to connect to the local environment, which is one of my favorite things. Coding and design thinking are introduced. So there's a lot of opportunity to integrate these within the other organizing ideas, which will make for more meaningful applications. Indigenous perspectives are included along with some background knowledge, which will help the teachers to build that understanding of Indigenous ways of knowing. And finally, there's something important to note is that this curriculum has multiple different methods and environments through which it can be approached. Some points to ponder is that the knowledge is very heavy. Therefore, we're going to need to be really creative in how we approach it. We're going to need to allow for exploration and investigation to help our students develop deeper understanding. Therefore, looking for creative ways to integrate as much as possible. Some of the current topics are being introduced earlier, for example, light and shadow and sound in grade 2. And because of this heavy load, we're really going to need to consider the organizing ideas of scientific methods and computer science to be considered for integration. So moving on to our science big rocks, we have 3. 1 is thinking like a scientist. 2 is experiential or inquiry learning, and 3 is the idea of integrative and spiraling concepts. So thinking like a scientist is all about fostering curiosity in our students. We want to teach them how to ask deep investigative questions. And as a teacher, we want to step away from the idea of being the keeper of all knowledge and to try to shift our focus to learning alongside our students. And so then, so our second rock is experiential inquiry learning. Here, we want to ensure that we're doing science, as science is a verb. So moving away from worksheets and note-taking and really ensuring that we're creating hands-on learning opportunities. So a nice way to think about that is the different environments in which we can approach this curriculum. So nature-based learning is a fun way to look at that. And the idea of process versus product. So really engaging in that learning where the students and the teachers will learn alongside each other and understand that it's all about the journey to get to the end product. And in that journey is where a lot of that rich learning will happen. The third rock, integrative and spiraling concepts, is that all of our organizing ideas can be integrated within one another, especially the scientific methods and computer science. Okay, so for science implementations and supports, the first thing we're looking at are some planning tools and templates. We have linked here scope and sequences for you. And so these are basically a year at a glance, which will show you the learning outcomes that can be taught throughout the year. There's 4 major school boards partnering in creating science planning and resources together. And so in addition to the scope and sequences that are linked here, in August, teachers will have access to optional science lessons called mini science bundles. For resources, we've got a link to our science EPD page where you can find the new curriculum there. And other relevant need to knows like the NCSI site, current PG series that are happening right now throughout Alberta, and the principal curriculum and bridging documents. So you could also consider signing up for a free trial to Mystery Science, which will run until the end of June 2024, which has a wealth of mini lessons, unit plans that are great for teaching this new curriculum. And when we're thinking about professional learning opportunities at this moment in time here, we have a couple of series, like I mentioned, happening throughout the province. There's a link here for you to dig into that a little bit more. I highly recommend these series. They're currently ongoing and they're recorded as well, so you can watch them on your own time. Okay, so thinking about ideas for September. So we're not exactly sure what the year is going to look like. Either way, these are things you can consider at the beginning of the year, even with the current curriculum. And so we're really going to try to think about the idea of building foundational routines to support your students in thinking like a scientist. So just like setting up your literacy block and your numeracy block. So to think like a scientist, we want to consider 2 things. The first thing is we want our students to be able to ask deep investigative questions. And the second thing is we want them to know how to record their observations in fun and creative, student-friendly ways. So to begin in September, we would suggest that you teach your students how to ask those higher level questions. So here is linked a cue chart to help you as the teacher wrap your head around, well, what exactly does a higher level question look like and sound like? So you can print this off for yourself. It'll help you scaffold your questions to allow for greater student engagement. The second resource here is Deep Dive into Critical Questions. This is a poster for you to put up in your classroom that puts these types of questions, these higher level questions, into student-friendly language. So for example, a low level question is considered a puddle question. And then when we refer to the next levels, we have lake questions and ocean questions. So using this metaphor, it just helps students really understand how deep they need to go to get to the answer of the question. You can use the guided slides that's linked here called How Do I Create a Question? You can use this with your students to have them practice formulating these different types of questions. Alongside teaching your students how to ask good questions, we want to teach them some journaling techniques to help them record their observations and their conclusions to their questions. So we're hosting a couple co-tots in June on 2 separate occasions. They're linked here for you, June 2nd and June 9th, where we will teach your students a different journaling technique each time, which you can then use in your classroom or outside for the remainder of June, and then again at the beginning of the school year. So these co-tots are live. You have the ability to learn alongside with your students. Because they're live, you have the ability to pause them and come back as soon as your kiddos are ready. So if you're interested, we're going to be showcasing the technique zoom in and zoom out, and then a second technique called hexagonal thinking, which really builds on vocabulary. So one more thing you can consider doing is heading outside and doing some citizen science, observing, recording, and then sharing your findings digitally through a global database where scientists across the world are collaborating together. So linked here under citizen science is a step-by-step poster on how to participate. And finally, there's a September scope and sequence there for you for kindergarten following instructions and grades 1 to 3 investigations, which are essentially your scientific method and computer science organizing ideas.
Thank you, Sheena. Now I'm going to share a little bit about the math. So as you can see by this chart, the organizing ideas in math and the progressions as we move through and spiral through that curriculum, you can see where content starts and you can see where it stops. Now, the important thing is that's a very gray stop, because we know that as if you're teaching grade 5, for example, you'll want to go back and look at what they were learning or what the curriculum has outlined for 3 and 4 as a way to scaffold. So you can see by this chart, though, it gives you a sense of planning and where different grade level organizing ideas begin and end. So for grade 4 to 6 math curriculum changes, some bright spots include that idea of the organizing idea where you're seeing progressions grade to grade so that connections are made earlier so students can build those concrete understandings, particularly in the way of fractions and things like ratio, decimal, and percents. The other bright spot is the integration and cross-curricular connections. So we know that coding and motion geometry are very similarly linked. So things that are in the science curriculum can complement the math curriculum. And of course, financial literacy, which we saw in Division 1 this year, those opportunities to integrate the Pew outcomes within math. And finally, another bright spot is early introduction of algebra to give students more time to develop understanding of equality. Now, this is kind of as we're implementing those first steps, that's where scaffolding will be very important, and use of those visuals, because some information will be needed, some background knowledge will be needed to get students, for example, in grade 5, to have some of that grade 3, grade 4 background understanding around equality. Some points to ponder and things that we'll be addressing as we move forward. And again, we'll be walking alongside each other as we move step by step through our scope and sequence, is that there is a heavy emphasis in this curriculum on a standard algorithm as a demonstration of learning. And so the question comes is, which algorithm through which lens are we viewing the algorithm? And so we'll be providing some exemplars and definitions around that. Just the importance of addressing that concrete representational, getting it visual, and then moving to abstract, that progression. It's not explicitly defined within the Division 2 curriculum, so it's really going back to what is good pedagogy and practice around visual learning, visualization, and hands-on learning before we get into the abstract understanding. Another area that we'll be pondering is the bridging and scaffolding of those mathematical concepts. Again, we see in the Division 2 curriculum some upper level 1 or more grades moving down into the Division 2 area or lower. And so we really are, again, addressing the implementation gaps and timing of the sequence and progression of the learning outcomes and the organizing ideas. But these are some areas that we will work with the consultants on pulling out some more detail around where those gaps and scaffolds are needed, and that will be our priority area of supporting as we're moving forward. And then finally, another area is just the time to learn and build on that conceptual or concrete understanding. We know the content is quite heavy. And so again, where do you find the time to be able to build and integrate that in? So the big rocks around math really do focus on that application in real life, vocabulary, and the CRA, the concrete, representational, and abstract sequence. So the application in real life is, where is math seen in the world? So trying to create that real world opportunities. We want our students to be numerate citizens through that mental math, through solving daily math problems, and ones that engage them in their world. We know as we move into a digital world, actual physical money is becoming a thing of the past. And so how are we building in that concept of money, that concept of number, as we're moving forward into developing them as numerate citizens? For vocabulary, we have learning math-specific vocabulary to be able to really communicate effectively. Division 1, through the support of our communities of practice and our consultants, have developed the words that go along with the curriculum for K-3, and we'll be working on that for our Division 2 as well, because that visual representation through visual and word and seeing those sort of working word walls happening in math will be really important to support the scaffolding. And then our concrete, representational, and abstract, just again, optimizing those activities for hands-on, manipulatives, visualizing of that learning, getting them play around and seeing the visual with the concrete, with the abstract, and being able to kind of talk through that, again, that visual, verbal learning around math. So implementation supports that are available for you to take a look at and to sort of start thinking about if that's where you're at, is there are K-6 scope and sequence documents for K-3, but now for 4-6 as well. And there are tabs within each one, which you can go a bit deeper into the learning outcomes. That'll give you a sense of your long-range plan, as well as sort of where the starting points are from a PG perspective from learning services. And then a reminder, as the other consultants have shared with you, just there's a wealth of information now. We have had some districts piloting the 4-6 or optionally implementing the 4-6. And so there is some really good resources that are being available now through recordings, through series like Sheena was talking about. And so again, we know that there's a lot. We're encouraging, just take it a step at a time, but you might want to dip your toe into some of those areas and just see what's available. And then finally, resources. Our NCIS site, as well as the EPD for Math, continues to sort of be the container, the holder of all of this pedagogical support, as well as the practical supports. We have the ARPDC has the Math New Curriculum resources, and what they've got there is actually comparison documents, so you can see where those jumps and those scaffolds might be needed. There's also a great article here around notice and wonder around instructional routines, so kind of like what Kim was alluding to with the literacy block, really looking at establishing those instructional routines early on in mathematics. And then Mathology Little Books. It is a Division 1 resource. However, it is open for you. We have a lifetime license. So if you haven't checked it out, go into one of our NCIS, go into our NCIS site, and under grade 1, 2, or 3, you'll see resources. And then take a look at Mathology Little Books. Your school license login information is right there for you, but it's a great way to again have those conversations and again walking and talking through the math. Some ideas for September, again, this is just to inspire you or to validate the work you're already doing, is establishing those math routines, setting up your math block. Shelley has put some amazing math talks, which are presentation slides that you literally walk through and talk through the math with them. So this is a great way to get started with your students in September. Incorporating those math games. We really are encouraging the, because of the move to abstract right away, is really bringing them back to the place value. So we've just linked a few ideas around some games that you might want to consider starting your year with. Again, really going back into understanding number, looking at place value in a, you know, even within the hundreds, and then moving up to the thousands, and then of course it goes greater into the division 2. And then finally, visualization, again, starting with the vocabulary journal, talking and walking through the word wall. And what we've embedded in here for you is a document that has been developed by the ARPDC, which is quite phenomenal. And so what it's done is it's taken the K-6 curriculum and it's hyperlinked all of the vocabulary words to a virtual definition. So it's your living sort of word wall. So if you're curious about what are sort of, how can I get started on a word wall, or what vocabulary would I be looking at within a number, for example, which is where we would be recommending you start, then we would, it's linked right in there. And the beauty about it is it comes up with the word as well as a visual and a description. So for your own sake, as you're going through it, if you're new to teaching math, or you want to learn a bit more about different ways you can show math, then this would be a great place to start for you. And finally, on the right, I've shown you just an example of how a 60-minute math block might take place. And so just thinking about that creative way to establish that hands-on, minds-on, student-centered routine, so that there's those opportunities for kids to engage in mini lesson, but also that independent working through a differentiation, maybe working with small group, and then the importance of sort of that assessment, that check-in at the end to see, you know, where you're at to inform your practice for moving forward. And I'll also be sharing with you the K-3 French Immersion Language Arts and Literature, because that will again be mandated for the K-3 and optional for the grade 4 to 6 teachers in our French immersion programs. And so you can see here how the information, how the organizing ideas also are quite heavy in that phonics and phonological awareness. And so just understanding that these are very similar to the English program, because we know you're navigating in grade 1 to 3, you're navigating both the ELAL and the FELAL outcomes. And so just being mindful that this is very closely aligned to that. So some bright spots that Rachel shared with me, and I'm sharing on her behalf, is that it is easier and less to navigate the curriculum. We know that the previous FELAL curriculum was like many pages, and this is much fewer pages, as well as the CUSP provides some more detail and direction on what specifically would be taught. It also, for those of you that have been piloting this work, and we've had about 60 of our teachers, so almost 85% of our French immersion teachers have piloted the FELAL this year. And what we've seen is the neuralistic approach really is that foundational piece where all language learning starts with listening and then progresses to speaking. So it's that emphasis, just like on the English program, around oral language and that oral language development and having those opportunities embedded within your instructional routine. And then the grade level, the grade to grade French language CUSPs progressions really do build on each year. So that idea of scaffolding, if you've got new students coming in who maybe need some reminders and some scaffolding, but then also for moving forward and seeing where kids would be going. And then the focus on the fundamentals of reading. So we felt this was a bright spot around the phonological awareness and phonics. But we also know that it kind of contributes to a point to ponder. We recognize that resources to support the more technical skills of reading, when we have students coming in, for example, in kindergarten who have no previous exposure, and we know that the silent period of our language learners, it takes time. And so trying to reconcile the outcome expectations with what we know developmentally, particularly our K-1 students are at. And so really looking at supports and scaffolds, and even when we would assess and when we would delay assessment on some of those key outcome areas. And then also pondering grade 4 to 6 with optional implementation and how we might support that. And integrating, we know that this is always a challenge for our French immersion language arts and literature teachers, where you are looking at integrating those ELA minutes within the curriculum. Again, we feel because it is so nicely aligned, it will provide a bit more of a through line for you. But again, it takes time to understand and to make sense of those changes, and it will take time. So the big rocks of FELAL that Rachel shared was really the best practice of a neuro-linguistic approach. Student engagement and being vocabulary rich. We're seeing that theme, aren't we, around oral development, getting kids engaged in the learning and vocabulary. So the big rocks are also common between subjects because they are really universal strategies. So the neuro-linguistic approach is really looking at that emphasis on oral language and foundational sentence structure, things like speaking before writing, and then student engagement as hands-on activities, as getting it as hands-on as we can, getting kids talking, and then not necessarily just completing worksheets. Certainly they have their place, but wouldn't be the emphasis that we would see in our elementary schools, because it's that rich listening and speaking skills that are critical before kids can develop any type of confidence or competency around the reading and the writing. And then finally, that vocabulary rich, which supports the other two, and looking at that interaction with words and wordplay and visual supports, so that students are reading them through repeated practice and games. Some implementation supports that, again, because this is a new curriculum coming in. There have been some, Edmonton Catholic School have provided some really great scope and sequences that are available for teachers to start off with. Like I say, we're sharing a lot of resources between the province now because we've had some more experience with this new curriculum. And then Rachel also just linked in here for you a video refresher. So if you're new in French immersion, or you'd like to kind of do a bit of an overview refresher of what is the neuro-linguistic approach, there's a video here linked for you to take a look at. And then again, just a reminder that ARPDC is a wealth of, that's kind of the repository now across the province for you to be able to dig deeper into those planning, instructional supports, but also the videos. And there's all the PGs recorded, as well as resources, Blackline Masters. So there's a lot of new things coming on there all the time. And I know that the CRC is working with a working group right now with FELAL to try to develop some more September-ready resources for you. And it's not just with FELAL, it's now they're integrating, of course, the math and the science. And so do please take a look at these other resources that have been shared, and we wanted to extend the sharing to you. So where do you go from here? What we would recommend is top 3 tips. We recognize there's a lot going on and it is the end of the school year, but as you're thinking about it, maybe taking some time today during your PD day, or as you're moving forward and grappling with, oh goodness, where do I start? It's just, giving yourself grace and recognizing that it is a bit like a scavenger hunt. We can't know all of the detail, nor does anyone expect you to do that. But coming back to the big 5 is recognizing that you are professionals, and this is the work of being a professional. We navigate these complex spaces all the time. And so whether you're teaching a new grade or we're teaching new curriculum, it is something each year as we have a new group of students coming, we're always looking at navigating a bit of this treasure map. And so as you move forward, we would recommend that if you haven't really become familiar with the New Learn Alberta site, then please, that would be the #1 tip we would provide for you. If you go into the curriculum hub and you look, there is a video that gives you an overview. There's a PG support around that. And so will be really, really helpful for you to just navigate your curriculum, print what you need, see what resources are available provincially for you. In addition, of course, the ones that we have linked in top tip number two, which is the Alberta Regional PD Consortium. Again, with new curriculum, Alberta Education partnered with Alberta Regional Consortiums across Alberta to develop out resources to support teachers. We are lucky in a big board that we have a learning services that can help guide you along that. Many of our smaller rural boards don't have the same level of support. And so this really is a culminating hub of all of the resources that have been created for teachers across Alberta and certainly are available for you to use. And finally, last but certainly not least, is the EPD sites as well as the Google site for new curriculum or subject specific. So you'll see that there is a wealth of information on there for you to be providing. Now, what I've done is I've linked in our Google site under what's new, more detail around these top three. This presentation will also be linked there so you can go in and play live with the links. So finally, in closing, I just want to say a big thank you for the new curriculum implementation team. But if you need help, you have questions, you can't find something, please, we are here to serve you. So don't hesitate to email us, newcurriculum@cssd.ab.ca, or the elementary core team at elementary@cssd.ab.ca. And I really want to say a big thank you to Sheena, Christine, Kim, Shelley, Bev, and of course Rachel and Joan for helping to support new curriculum as we move forward transitioning to next year. I just want to remind you that just like this year when we started it together by walking alongside each other and giving each other grace. And so we got this, and we will continue to walk alongside and take it a step at a time. Thanks, everyone, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions at all.